Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle, and I'm so glad to be able to be here today. Thank you to Angie for this opportunity to share on this platform. And hello to those that are maybe at the beginning of their divorce process, going through divorce. Maybe their divorce has been finalized, or you've been divorced a few years like me. I know that divorce is hard enough. Raising children are hard enough, but today my topic is co-parenting when you have a child that has special needs, or even children that have special needs, because I've met many families that have multiple children that have special needs. And so I felt like this topic was important. It's something that I'm going through currently. And I know I'm like, if I'm going through it, then likely other women are facing the same challenge, the same battles. And I'm like, I just want to be able to encourage you. So before I give my introduction, I want to share a quote with you. So you might see me look away. I have the quote written down and I don't want to get too much off topic. So the quote states, I am the parent of a child who has special needs. Sometimes I feel extremely overwhelmed, exhausted, defeated, and alone. Sometimes I feel like giving up, but this truly is not an option. Nurturing myself is an option. Simple acts of kindness to ourselves can help us through. And that's by someone that works for Parents Supporting Parents, which is an organization. And so when I read that quote, I'm like, it just speaks to me. It speaks to my heart. It speaks to my situation. So, in that, as I just shared that quote with you, hi, I'm Danielle. So, officially, with my introduction, I am a certified life coach. And I usually work with women that are struggling due to infertility, miscarriage, and also single moms by choice. So, those that are moms that are deciding to adopt or even be a foster parent and are finding unique ways to start their family. And so in that, it's kind of all three seasons that I've been in. But addition to that, I'm like many women that wear many hats. I'm also a mom that has a child with special needs. So my daughter is 6 years old. And last year was recently diagnosed with epilepsy. So I knew something had been going on since she was about 1 year old. And in that, she kind of had these episodes. She was in daycare, and the daycare worker would call me, and she's like, "Oh, your daughter is just staring off into space." Or we're calling her, and she's not responsive. And I was thinking, I'm like, maybe she's just shy. Maybe something else is going on. I'm like, maybe is there abuse? Is she allergic to a chemical that's in the environment, or that they're using in the home, in-home daycare? And so in that, then the episode started happening at home. And then when that happened, I took her right away to the emergency room and wasn't taken seriously. They're like, oh, it's seizure-like activity. But the doctors are very condescending. They really didn't help in that sense, unfortunately. They sent me to a children's hospital that was close by in the area that I was living at the time. And sent me to pediatric neurologist for my daughter, and he did a 1 hour EEG. And they say, oh, everything's fine. And then COVID happened. So that put everything on hold. So fast forward to just a few years later after that. So almost about 3-4 years later, so my daughter is about 5 years old. And in that, overcome COVID and everything had seemed okay. But I had noticed one evening her arm was twitching. So it was just like all of a sudden her arm would move. And she's like, Mom, my arm is twitching. And I'm like, what do you mean it's twitching? And then I noticed that when I take her to the store, she would lift up one arm to reach for something and the other arm was limp. And so she didn't mention anything else, like any headaches, no other symptoms. So I took her to the pediatrician. And then they gave me a referral to a new pediatric neurologist, who's a different doctor, a whole new state that I was living in. And in that, the pediatric neurologist, once again, she's like, oh, maybe you're just pushing her too hard. And I'm just like, I was homeschooling my daughter at the time, which helped me to kind of realize that something just wasn't right. And so after we did the MRI, we did a video EEG, 24 hours, and then also one in office. She got that formal diagnosis last year. So in May 2023, so officially it'll be 1 year coming up in a few months. And so in this, it was just like, it was something that I knew. And I was glad to be able to get that answer in the diagnosis. But at this point, I'm still in the midst of I have so many questions, and there's still so many question marks. And even though I know that my daughter has focal seizures, it's just like there's still so much. And so even in the midst of this, as I was getting the diagnosis for her, went through a divorce. So I've been divorced for 3 years. And so in this, I've been navigating these kind of rivers of co-parenting. And all these things come up. What happens when you're co-parenting with someone that really doesn't understand the condition that your child is struggling with? I've spoken to parents where the person they're co-parenting with doesn't believe that their child even has any special needs, or there's no concern. So maybe the mom sees something, has a child on medication, and the other parent says, oh, nothing is wrong, everything's fine. And so that's actually the situation that I find myself in, is I see that epilepsy is very serious for those that have children that are struggling with the condition. With my ex-husband, for him, he really doesn't understand the full weight of it. He doesn't understand the gravity of it. He's like, oh, we don't need to give her medicine, and we can just do this. We just need to love her more and do all these different things. And I get a little bit of the cultural aspect, but at the same time, having to really kind of send that message home to him that this is something my daughter can die from. And it's scary thinking about it. And, if you are a parent that has a child that has special needs, it's likely that you're going through this every single day. So in my case, in addition to being a life coach and a mom that has a child with special needs, I also, my 9 to 5 too, work with children that do have special needs. So I'm around it all day long. I'm, engrossed in it with children that are on the spectrum and that have a variety of other needs. It's something that's on my heart, but I see it every single day. And I see what many parents are struggling with, that feeling of being overwhelmed. For me, as it's like, it's this moments of just being beyond fatigued, not only just tired physically, but tired mentally, as you try and navigate the calls to the insurance companies and the specialists and the doctors and so much more. So with my daughter, trying to coordinate me starting a new job and finding a job that's flexible to where I can kind of be there at the drop of a hat if she needs me. And then still trying to navigate the pediatric neurologist, the pediatric urologist, the child psychiatrist, the counselor, the dermatologist, the pediatrician, the dentist, and so many other doctors and specialists, and trying to get the referrals and getting referred to a doctor that doesn't see children, which seems to happen often, and having to find a doctor. Then I found a doctor, the doctor retired, and all these different things happen. So in the midst of this, I want to talk a little bit more about how to kind of navigate co-parenting when your child has special needs. So kind of the main points that I want to kind of talk about is, for one, making sure you're doing what's in the best interest of your child. I have this written down, so I won't ramble. 2, letting go of the guilt. 3, realizing that you're doing the best that you can. And then 4, affirming yourself. There's so much that can be talked about regarding this topic, but I'm like, those are the 4 just kind of main ones. So if you don't take anything else away from my presentation today, you're like, what did Danielle talk about? In this, I want to remind you, the goal is to do what's in the best interest of your child. And so that can look very different based on your child's unique needs, based on your parenting arrangement, your parenting schedule, and just overall regarding your situation. That can be very broad. So, based on where you live, based on your financial kind of situation at this time, based on where you are regarding your divorce, regarding your custody arrangement. For me, I have sole physical custody of my daughter, which was actually a fluke, which I'll explain in a moment. And then just joint legal custody, so I went through divorce once again during COVID. And so in that, when I filed the papers, I had planned to just do, initially it was both. I'm trying to think of how did I set up the arrangement. I was just trying to think of what was the best to do. It was in an abusive kind of marriage and so much more. And so I knew I need to do what was best for my daughter and for myself. When I originally filed the paperwork, I had done where it was initially like it was just me physically having custody of my daughter and then having joint legal. And then from there, I had, it turns out the courts lost my paperwork. So I had to do everything again, refile everything again. And then I refiled it and I did joint. So it was joint physical and joint legal custody. And it turns out when I sent in the second copy of everything, they found the first copy of the paperwork and they disregarded the second copy. It was joint. And so I currently have sole physical custody of my daughter and joint legal custody. So in that, it makes it difficult because just as I try and make decisions and try and reason with someone that is very hard to reason with, as you know, for those that are going through it, it can be a daily challenge, especially, it's hard enough when you're going through divorce. It's hard enough when you're working out parenting arrangements. But then when there's that extra kind of factor of your child having special needs and unique needs and needs that are maybe time sensitive and so much more, and trying to tend to those needs and then just try and balance everything else, it can be complicated. So like in my case, with my daughter, I just have taken back full custody of her. I was trying to be kind of lenient and flexible, and I was sharing her with my ex-husband. I had her half the week, he had her half the week. And you're like, well, how do you do that with 7 days? But we just kind of worked it out. And then now I'm at a point where I do have her usually about 6 days out of the week. And sometimes he will get her on the weekend. But at this point, due to her condition, we need the consistency. I'm the one that takes her to all the doctor's appointments. I'm the one that, does the IEP meetings with school. I'm the one that makes sure she takes her medicine on time. And then when dad has her, I say, please make sure you do this, this, and this, and just check in from time to time. And then that's pretty much the situation. But in this, I know that my daughter's being taken care of. And so kind of going back to that goal, doing what's in the best interest of your child or children that have special needs. Sometimes that might mean having them 24/7, which I know can be exhausting. Sometimes that means, maybe just writing out a list for that other parent. But in that, it can be hard because right now it's the making sure that I have medicine at both places. So right now, making sure she has medicine at school, making sure she has medicine at dad's place, and making sure she has medicine at my place, and trying to divide all of that and making sure that she has her preferred items too. That's a whole other thing. As my daughter goes these different kind of fixations. Before, she was fixated on bouncy balls. Thankfully, those are cheap. But in that, she would always have to be holding one. And then we would have bouncy balls in the shower. I would go to bed and there's bouncy balls. Now her whole thing is bugs. So now there's bugs everywhere. So I'll step on like this plastic slug and these toy snakes, and we collect bugs, and she has her bug kit, and everything is just about bugs 24/7. We talk about bugs. You will get up at 3 a.m. and watch videos about bugs. So that's kind of what's going on right now. But in that, realizing that it's hard, it's exhausting, it's a lot. I don't know what's going to happen from day to day, as I'm in the process of transitioning my daughter off of her old medicine, which she had adverse reactions to, and then transitioning her to a new medicine, and just kind of navigating that and trying to see how this is going to impact school, how this will impact my job, and will they be willing to work with me? It's so many things. So in this, it's that first thing, just really figuring out what's best for your child. Is that to, maybe kind of tweak your parenting arrangement. I've seen some parents where they will both, if you can, live under the same roof, and they're in 2 different places of the house or whatever, wherever they're living, and they parent that way just to meet the needs of the child because the transition is hard. I know for me personally, I did kind of close distance parenting where I was about less than an hour away. Then I've done long distance co-parenting where I moved to another state, which was 4 hours away, and it was challenging, but in it was nice because it was a lower cost of living, had a lot more opportunities. That's where I was able to get more medical help and get more answers for my daughter that I wasn't getting in the previous state where I was living, and then now have moved back. So now I'm about an hour away from my daughter's father, which has had the benefits. I've seen him step up in some ways, but in many ways, things have not changed. So it's really figuring out, okay, what to do next. So that's kind of where I am a little bit. And then also kind of point number 2 is letting go of that guilt. And a lot of times just thinking, I was reading articles, just preparing for this presentation, and just thinking about, how do you co-parent with someone when your child has special needs? And I was reading these articles, and it was talking about, okay, do this. Communication is important. And, make sure you both see eye to eye and create a written plan and all of these things, and, be respectful. And I'm just like, wow, if I had those things in the beginning, I might not be divorced, in a way. And so realistically, I realized that many things that are kind of mentioned in the articles are great on paper. But when it comes to real life, like this whole thing of communication is like one reason why I got divorced, because we didn't communicate well. So, it was already hard enough, but realizing that communication is not our kind of best thing, that my ex-husband and I we're working on it. Things are getting better, but it's still that challenge of communicating. And so in this, I'm learning how to just kind of let go of the guilt. And that guilt comes from like communication challenges that I mentioned. It's hard when I'm trying to communicate, and sometimes it's like talking to a wall. It's like this wall behind me. The wall doesn't respond. The wall doesn't, kind of change. It's that wall and it's standing there. And that's how sometimes it feels like it is with my ex-husband, where he's just kind of unresponsive, or he doesn't really quite understand the situation and the gravity of everything that's also too, because he's not at the meetings, he's not at the doctor's appointments. It's not doesn't seem to be a priority to him. So, I try and give him an overview, but sometimes it's hard to explain everything that was discussed when I've had a 2-hour meeting with the specialist. And when I've had that meeting with recently had a meeting with my daughter's principal and the school nurse and the school counselor and her teacher. And as I try and kind of relay the information to him, and sometimes it's frustrating because I'm like, well, if you really cared, you would have been there. If this was a priority, if you want what's best for our child, you would have made more effort and you would have been there. And so in this, me personally, I have to let go of the guilt as a single mom, as a mom that has a child with special needs, as just someone that's just trying to make things work. When I get tired, sometimes when I am just at my wit's end, and I kind of recently had a moment where I just exploded on my daughter and I yelled. And I'm like, I try not to yell. I'm like, my inside voice sounds like my outside voice. But it's those moments where I felt guilty for yelling because I was exhausted. My daughter kept asking the same thing over and over again. And then also, just thinking about that guilt of not being there. Recently, I put my daughter in school. So I was homeschooling her before, homeschooled her for kindergarten and for the first half of first grade. And now she's been in first grade and going to public school for almost about 2 months. So the school year is actually almost over. But in that, when she had her first seizure in the classroom and they didn't catch it, and thinking I should have been there and feeling like a horrible parent. And sometimes when I'm trying to communicate, or my daughter's trying to communicate and she just can't, and it's not working out, feel that guilt when she's with dad and saying, like this weekend where she's transitioning off one medicine, her medication, and I'm like, I should be there. Or, just those little things that you just might feel guilty for, saying, I'm not capable. I'm not enough. I'm not able to give my child enough, when you're just trying, doing things to maybe see a change in their behavior and it's just not working. When you're doing all that you can to find ways to support your child and you're like, they're just not responding. It's just not going the way I wanted it to. But in that, as a parent, I'm like, if I'm going to co-parent, I can't, overcompensate for my ex-husband. But at the same time, I have to let go of the guilt because it's stopping me from being a better parent to my daughter. When I'm trying to teach her something, like when I was homeschooling her, and I just felt this guilt. I'm like, well, I should be doing more. And because, her grades are low because I'm not doing enough. And yet realizing that my daughter's medication that she takes impacts her memory. So I'm working against that, realizing that she has trouble with auditory processing. So I'm working against that. And so it's all these different things. And I'm like, well, it's my fault for this. And it's my fault for that. And I was talking to a mom recently as I work with kids. So I'm also a behavior technician in the midst of other things. And really, I'd mentioned my background in behavior technician, and in the past have been a registered behavior technician. And my background is also in community health education and educational psychology. So I like figuring out how people learn, what works and what doesn't work. So in this case, with my daughters, I'm trying to teach her things and trying to help her understand, realizing that there's just some things that she's not going to grasp. And as I've been working with other parents, I've been able to help them kind of see that at times that sometimes it's difficult and it's hard. And I remember talking to a mom recently whose child is autistic. And she said, she looked at me just straight in the face, right in the eyes. And she's like, is this my fault? And just thinking about how many parents that have kids with special needs, realizing that, I was looking at the statistics, and there's over, even just in the kindergarten through K through 12 school system, this is just the children that are in school and that are registered, over 7 million children that have special needs. So think about all those households that are impacted, and how many people go to sleep and then wake up and go to sleep and wake up and just feel like they're to blame for their child's challenges or their child's disability, and how isolating that must be. And I get it. where sometimes you're not even able to take your child outside because sometimes of their behavior or things that they do, or it's just too complicated, or you're like, okay, well, I know a tantrum is coming and you don't want them to have a tantrum in public, so you just stay inside. And I've heard other parents say it, and it's true. Other kids can be mean and people can be mean. And even just trying to explain it to family, I know has been just frustrating, and kind of that guilt that they can put on you, saying, okay, we should be doing this. Or they say, oh, you're just babying them too much, or just don't pay attention to that behavior, or just don't do this. And you're like, no, my child has its condition. And so for me personally, visiting family, they're like, oh, we'll just go to the movies. You can just leave your daughter with family. And I'm like, well, no, I know that after 6 p.m. is when we have trouble. And that's when she gets, overly tired and trying to get her into bed so she won't have a seizure. And that's when we have most trouble regarding her seizures, are in the evening time, and trying to explain it to family. Like, well, we don't understand why she can't do this, or, she should be able to do this, or, you just need to let her do this. And I'm like, yeah, I get, on paper, it looks like this, or maybe for your child, this works. But realizing that that's why they call autism a spectrum. That's why they, many other conditions, it's like, just because your neighbor might have a child that has autism, or your best friend or your coworker, it can be so different for you. And I'm learning that as I'm working with children that have special needs. And as even when I'm with my child that has epilepsy, I'm a part of a support group, which is helpful on Facebook. But even at the same time, realizing that even though many of our stories are similar, the other parents there's still things that are so different. And I don't know what to expect next. And that's the thing is, as a parent, I'm always kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop, saying, okay, what's going to be next? Like with my daughter that has tics. So in this, what I mean by tics is like before she had a vocal tic where she was clicking her tongue. Now she has a motor tic where when you ask her a question, her eye will blink, and it's just one eye. And I ask her, okay, is your eye okay? Is everything all right? And she doesn't even really realize it, but it's just her tic that she's going through right now. And then we'll rotate in about a month or two to a different tic that she's going through. Another time I was cracking her knuckles, just kind of repeatedly, like she'd wake up and crack her knuckles and go back to sleep. So it's like, I don't know what tomorrow will hold. And probably for you that's listening, you're kind of in that same boat. So in that, I just had to release the guilt and just realize that I can't be there 24/7 for her when she's at school. I can't be there always to hold her hand when she's with family, when I let her go to after school program, and doing other things. I can't always be there. I can't always, schedule all the appointments back to back to back as much as I want to. I have to take care of myself. She can't miss too much school. I can't miss too much work. So I can't feel guilty when I can't take her to the dermatologist right away, or when I have to reschedule an appointment. I have to let that go. So many just little things. It's just the sense of just not feeling like I'm enough. I'm like, am I capable? And even as a single parent, even though I'm technically co-parenting, so much of it is on my own as I try and figure out the financial aspect, as I'm the only one that's communicating with the doctors and trying to come up with a plan for school. It's kind of co-parenting, but it really is like just me, myself, and I. So, in that, learning the importance of just letting the guilt go. And then also realizing, kind of along the same lines, is that as a parent, you're doing the best that you can, for your child. And, a lot of people don't see that. They see that tantrum that your child has in the middle of Walmart, or they say, oh, that child is misbehaving, or that child is so-and-so. And we know that that child always does this, this, and this. And that's what people see. But a lot of times people don't really understand when you're in a public place, because you have to go shopping. You have to do activities. You might have to go out to pay bills and get a money order and different things, that a lot of times you're doing the best that you can. So I want to affirm you in that no matter what you're facing or how hard things get, that you're doing the best that you can at this time. And realizing that as you're co-parenting and maybe you're trying to communicate with that other parent, maybe they're making things difficult. Maybe they're a narcissist. Maybe they're abusive. Maybe they're just not willing to accept it. Or, maybe in this case, maybe they are on board with you, which is nice, which is helpful. And that's what I would love to see more people work together, putting differences aside. That's what I'm trying with my ex-husband now, to just put those differences aside. Even, if we're not speaking, or I'm frustrated with him because he hung up as I was talking to him, doing, what needs to be done for my daughter and doing what's best for her and trying as much as I can to leave that line of communication open. But for those that are going through it, know that it's easier said than done. And in that, also mentioning, whether you're, maybe thinking about divorce, maybe you're in the midst of a divorce, please don't stay in a toxic situation, a toxic relationship, a toxic marriage, something that's abusive, something where you're in danger and your children or your child's in danger because of your child's special needs. And I know that it's easier said than done, because you say, well, maybe you're the parent that's been at home and you haven't been working and you don't have that income. And I know that can be really difficult, because it takes money to raise a child with special needs. When you think about sometimes how much the prescriptions cost just out of pocket, or, for me, my daughter's sensory necklaces, those add up, and just buying her clothes. She eats through her clothes. So kind of having to buy her clothes, regularly, and different things. She has holes in her shirt from her eating through her clothes. And so, just thinking about that, but in that, please don't stay in something that's not good and that's not healthy, just to say, I have someone here, I have someone to support me. There are resources, there are support groups, there are foundations, there are people that you can reach out to, whether it's local, not local, that can hopefully help you in your situation. I do center-based work right now as I work with kiddos with special needs, and just thinking, for those that are not able to keep their children at home, we work with those kids during the day. Sometimes we have them up to 8 hours a day, so their parents can work, so they can get other things done. So hopefully you're able to find that support network, that support group, resources, even if it's not local, they can help you, as you kind of transition and kind of go through all of this. And I know, to be honest, sometimes I've seen people where their parenting schedules, the court will create them or you create them, and sometimes the court will change things, and it's not fair. And you have to kind of figure out how to work with it when you're like, well, I'm the person that primarily takes care of my child, but my ex has been given the majority of the time. That can be really hard too. And so in that, it's just trying to make the best of what you have in that situation. And once again, doing what's best for your child. So maybe that's packing extra, giving your ex extra medicine or extra clothes or whatever it might be that you need, that's the best for your child. For me, it's just making sure my child is clean and fed. So sometimes that might mean packing a little extra food. It might mean, just putting very explicit instructions on her medicine, or calling my ex to make sure he's giving her the medicine, giving it to her the correct amount and at the right time, and texting him and going that extra mile. It's exhausting, but sometimes I'm like, this is what I have to do to make things work. So, it's not easy. And I wish that there was like a kind of 5-step process: do this, this, and this, and then things will be perfect. And your co-parenting kind of relationship that you have. But in that case, many times co-parenting is hard enough by itself, let alone when you have a child or children that have special needs. It can just take it to a whole nother level of just kind of being complex and frustrating. And then also in this, just being reminded of just the importance of just affirming yourself. And so, before we close, I do want to share some just affirmations with you, because I know it's been helpful for me as I sit down and just try and think of, what does the future hold for my daughter? Sometimes I just watch her as I sleep. Well, not as I sleep, as she sleeps in this case. And I just look at her. I check her to make sure she's still breathing. I check her to make sure she hasn't had a seizure, make sure she doesn't have a fever, that she's too warm, making sure she's warm enough. Just sometimes looking at her, and it's 3 a.m, 2 a.m, and just thinking, what does the future hold for her? Will people be nice to her? Will people be kind to her? Will she get married? Will she find someone to love her for her, and someone that's not going to take advantage of her? Will her seizures get worse? With in her case, with her epilepsy, I've talked to different doctors, and, one doctor I've talked to, a specialist, he's like, she's not going to outgrow this. And this will be her journey for the rest of her life. And just thinking, she's only 6. Do I want her to be on medication for the rest of her life? And kind of like a new thing that we're facing is that with my daughter, she's had kind of adverse kind of reaction to her previous medication, was causing hallucinations. And so it's something that she's been saying it's been happening for a while. And she had never mentioned it, hadn't, no, nothing. And so about a month ago, she had mentioned having these hallucinations. I took her to the emergency room right away. They pretty much said, we don't know what to do. I did a video call with psychiatrist, and they said, you need to get her to a pediatric psychiatrist right away. I did, found someone, and they were able to see her by way of video within a few short days, which was great. But then he's like, okay, she needs this medication. Try to put her on antipsychotic medication. And as a parent, and kind of sitting here thinking, I talked to, my ex-husband about it, but really saying she's too little for that. I don't want to put her on this medication, and just thinking, will this get worse if I don't put her on the medication? Do I wait? Do we just kind of watch? What do we do? As I've been asking around, find out that our family have this family history of different conditions that I didn't know about because no one talks about it. So in this, trying to figure out what to do, and a lot of it falls on me. And just thinking, okay, we could do the antipsychotic medication in addition to her regular medication, but how will it impact her? I know her seizure medicine right now, the daughter that I had before her taking that medication is a different child. And I tried to brace myself for it, but it's just like there's some things you just can't prepare for and just can't brace yourself for. And, just realizing that I was thinking and preparing for this kind of presentation, thinking really nothing prepares you overall to have a child that has special needs. Like maybe some people, they get kind of that warning before the child is born, and they're told, your child is going to have Down syndrome, or we see this and your child might not be able to walk because of this condition, or they're going to have a heart defect or another birth defect. And we can read articles. As I said, we can talk to a neighbor that maybe is going through something similar, or a coworker, or, kind of search the internet for people that had similar things. And yet in that, your child can be born and be completely different. Things can be okay. Things might not be okay. I have a family member where she was told that her daughter would never talk, would never walk, would likely not survive. And in that, her daughter's 5 years old now, and she put her kind of intense programs for school, and her daughter walks and she talks, maybe has some delays, but she's doing it and getting it done and wouldn't know anything's going on. But in that, it's just like realizing that there's no kind of guide when you find out that your child has special needs. Like, we can read books, which is great. We can talk to other parents, but you really don't know when someone tells you that your child has autism, or your child is going to, progressively lose their hearing, what to expect next. So it's just, it's like not really knowing. Like when my daughter's epilepsy, I don't know what's coming next. Like I can read stories, and I've heard other parents' stories of their children that are in high school and their children not able to drive or not able to get a job. And I wonder, I'm like, is that going to be my child in 10 years or less? What's going to happen? At this point I can try and plan, look at the finances, worked on my wheel and trying to think of kind of like what's going to possibly happen when I'm not here, or what happens if her seizures get worse, and what do I do? But in that, there's nothing really that can kind of prepare you. And it's just like, you really have to take it one day at a time. I feel like it's like when you have a child that has special needs, it's like that roller coaster. Sometimes you're kind of waiting in line, which it feels like sometimes waiting in line for those medical appointments and services and so much more. Then it's finally your turn to get on the roller coaster, and you don't know. Like, you can try and look ahead and say, okay, if I give my child this medicine, this might happen. This is what I've heard are the side effects. Or if we try this therapy, this can happen. But it's like you really don't know until you go through it. And it's like you go up, and then sometimes you go down, and then there's this unexpected turn and it throws you off. Like in my case, it's my daughter's hallucinations, which I didn't see coming. I didn't know. I know it was one of the things on the label, for her medication, but it was one of those trade-offs. And then when I talked to other doctors, like, oh no, hallucinations are not part of the medication. That's not due to that. And I'm like, well, that's what you're saying, but it says it on the, the label for the medication that could be a possible side effect. And then as others say, oh, she's too young for this. Maybe it's just imaginary friend. Maybe it's this, and this. And I'm like, well, something's going on. So what do I do next? And so maybe that's the place that you find yourself in. What do you do next? So in this, I don't have all the answers. It's something that I'm currently going through. It's a road that I'm currently traveling. May you be reminded that too, co-parent, it does require communication. It does require understanding. It requires a lot of patience and it requires time. It requires dedication, but also more importantly too, it requires flexibility, because I've had to really learn to be flexible when I don't know. In some cases, as I'm still trying to figure out, I know that my daughter has epilepsy, but it's obvious in her case that there's other things going on. She's struggling to read and is struggling with math, just basic 2+1. And as she still puts everything in her mouth, and I'm trying to get her tested and figure out kind of those next steps, but then just being flexible regarding the times where I'm like, okay, let's go to dad's place. And she's like, no, I don't want to go. And I'm like, okay, what do I do? Or, just trying to kind of switch things around and realize some things in life you can't be flexible with. Sometimes your job is not flexible. It's kind of that challenge. But sometimes just trying to, even going to the store, I'm like, okay, I have to kind of allot a little bit more time for these extra moments. And, for those that do have children that are on the spectrum or have other conditions, flexibility probably is a word that you maybe know all too well. When your child doesn't want to get out of the car, when they don't want to get dressed, when they only want to eat a certain kind of food from a certain place at a certain time, that's a certain temperature, that's a certain color, that's a certain texture. So all of those things, just so many things, you're just like, really, really? And to us, it seems simple, but to that, your child, it's like, it's earth shattering for them. You're like, oh, we just dropped our pencil on the floor, or we just took this away. And just taking away an object can be a 1-2 hour tantrum. It can lead to self-injurious behavior, can lead to just a lot of things, and you being late to something or missing an appointment or whatever it might be. And I know that can be frustrating. And as I stated, it takes that communication. And what do you do when that person that you are no longer with or that you divorce doesn't know anything about communicating? So I don't have all the answers, but one thing that I have learned is one thing that I can do is advocate for myself when it comes to dealing with my ex-husband, but also advocating when it comes to family and getting that. Sometimes the family often just won't understand. They just won't get it. Sometimes they see it, but they see the tantrum and they see kind of after effects and they say, oh, they're just picky. And you're like, no, this food has to be cut up this way and it has to be served this way, or this toy has to come this way, or, that I have to dress them this way, or we have to do things in this order. Or like for my daughter, realizing that there's no point in giving her multi-step directions because it just won't happen, but that I have to give her just first we do this, then we do this, then we do this. And then, I'm lucky if she remembers, just that previous step or the current step that we're on. Or, if I don't come and she's not kind of like zoned out, or I know like just after a certain period of time in the day that I'm just like, I don't say there's no point, but I know it's going to be difficult. But it means advocating for my daughter, as I stated, when it comes to my ex-husband. Remember recently my daughter had her 24-hour EEG and had everything hooked up to her, all the leads. We took it home and it has like this white bandage that goes around it, has all these colorful rainbow wires all over. And, just with my ex-husband, him not getting kind of how sensitive that my daughter was to the situation and different things. And he made a comment and she got really upset. And I remember having to call back and just saying, realize that she's really self-conscious about this. I know that you made a comment, you didn't think that it was going to be hurtful, but it was. And just trying to get him to see and understand. And in that, he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that I hurt her feelings. I didn't realize that I did this. And just kind of advocating for her and not saying, he purposely did it to be cruel. But in his case, he really didn't understand kind of the weight of his words and how, this procedure would impact my daughter and different things. And actually have another video EEG coming up, and the doctor wanted to do 4 days instead of 24 hours. Thankfully, I was able to bargain and get it down to 2 days. But then once again, it goes back to that advocating and saying, my daughter can't really afford to miss any more school at this point. She's not going to be able to handle being inside 4 days, being hooked up to all of this. What can we do? How can we make this work? And so in this, advocating and getting it cut down to 2 days. Advocating at school, especially, as they don't know my daughter and as they don't really seem familiar with her condition. And I appreciate the school nurse has been so nice and the nursing assistant, but saying, I'm at the school very often, at least once a week. And I kind of made a joke with them recently. And I said, I'm here so much. You should just put a desk between, this desk and this desk because I'm always here. And due to my daughter's health challenges, I often have to pick her up at least once a week early from school, just due to something that's going on. For example, recently with my daughter, they did mention it, but with school, they called, the nurse calls and she's like, oh, well, today we were doing a hearing test and a vision test. And I'm like, I'm on my way. And if they told me ahead of time, I could have prepped my daughter. Because I'm like, once they started, then she got super upset. And I'm like, there's no pulling her back from that. I'll just come get her. That was just the rest of her day. And it's just like I advocate. I'm like, if you guys let me know ahead of time that you're going to be doing these things and I can prep her for it, we can talk about it. We can practice it and she can get ready for it and be ready. So she's not getting physically sick because of it. So she's not crying. So she's not kind of inconsolable because of something as simple as just a hearing test and a vision test. But in this, realizing that I have a voice. And so, now as I'm co-parenting, but then also as a single mom, realizing I have a voice when it comes to my daughter. And I say at the beginning of the presentation, it all comes back to doing what's in the best interest of your child. So if it's saying no to something, if it's getting a second opinion about something, telling others about your child's strengths and their weaknesses, your child's schedules, the things that might set them off that are triggers, if it's doing those things, that's kind of, I realize that's what helps, even when it comes to my ex-husband and having to really say, these are the strengths I've noticed. These are her weaknesses. Can we work on this? Are you willing to help her with homework or talk to her about this or just check in with her regarding hallucinations and making sure she's okay and just keeping a, extra close eye on her. But in that, it can be a lot, as I stated, it can be overwhelming, as you likely already know. So in this, little by little, I want to just start wrapping up. And the next part, just thinking about, as I mentioned, just the importance of just affirming yourself. As a life coach, I want to help people that are in the midst of struggling, help them get to a better place, help them to get unstuck and to give them hope. And realize that maybe things that people told you that you couldn't do, like if someone says, oh, it's your fault that your child has this and you should have done this and your child is this because you didn't do this right, or this is your punishment, or whatever cruel things that people say to you, because I know people can say some really hurtful and harsh and mean things that they know nothing about, but they're quick to just say, oh, you're not a good mom because you didn't spank your child. Or you let your child get away with too much. Or just make them eat this. And I'm just like, you don't get that I can't just make my child eat anything that they don't like. And if they get hungry enough, they'll eat it. And I'm like, yeah, that's not exactly how it works for every kid, because then they won't eat and then they starve, in that. And then that just causes just more behaviors. So it doesn't always work like that. Say, oh, just discipline them or just take this away. And I'm like, yeah, you take that away from them. And then you deal with the 2-hour tantrum and all of that and hold them as they try and hit their head on something, or as they throw something, or as they kick something, or as they pull at your hair, or as something else, or as they elope, whatever it might be. Just realizing a lot of times people don't get it. But in that, as I just go through all of this, I just realize I have to keep just affirming myself. I have to just keep reminding myself, I'm like, Danielle, you're capable. And I tell other people too, other parents that I speak to, saying that this is not your fault. This is not like some punishment that's on you. This is not some curse that's been brought on your family, because maybe that's what you've been told. And different cultures see things differently. They view sickness and health and conditions differently. I want you to be able to counter those thoughts or the negative things people have told you, that you're not a good enough parent, that you'll never be able to parent on your own. Maybe your ex has told you that you're a bad parent, that you're not doing enough, that you're not good enough, that you're not capable, that you're just not enough overall. Maybe family has told you that. Maybe they're just like, you're just not parenting right. Or back in my day, we used to do this, or you're too soft on your kids, or you're giving them too much, you spoil them too much. That's why they're acting out, or different things like that. And you're like, no, my child genuinely has a condition that impacts their behavior, and so much more. A lot of people don't get it. But in that, affirming yourself. So I have some affirmations I like to share with you. So it's about 10 in total. So the first one just states, I'm a loving and dedicated parent doing the best that I can for my child. So may you speak that over yourself and say, even in the hardest days, even when your child is on the floor crying and you want to cry too, and maybe you are crying along with them as you cry in frustration and being weary and tired, may you say, I'm a loving and dedicated parent, and I'm doing the best that I can with my child and for my child. Second affirmation is, I am a source of strength and support for my child, no matter the challenges that we face. So realizing that you can support your child and that you're going to face challenges, and likely many challenges throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year, but that you serve as a source of strength and support for your child. And you're able to support them in unique ways that many other people are not able to support them, even if you feel like you're inadequate or not capable to just handle their condition. I know a lot of times it can be really hard and overwhelming. The third affirmation says, I am proud of the progress that my child has made, no matter how small it seems. Because I work with kiddos daily to work on just little things as they work on just asking them, what is your name? And they're able to say it back to me. And it just makes me so happy as I work with them on toileting, and potty training, as I work with them on just asking for things, or for that child that has never said, I love you. And I'm able to work with them to have them say, I love you to their parent, or to say thank you. Those little things, they might seem little. Some people are like, oh, they just said thank you, or they just said, I want this. That's not a big deal. But for that parent that has a child that maybe is not verbal, just getting them to just point to what they want instead of having a tantrum or having a meltdown, it's just huge. It's big. If they just point to the picture, you're like, well, why are you crying? And they're like, I want crackers. I want to go outside. I want to do this. Even if they can't say it verbally, they point to that picture. And you're like, we're communicating. It's something that's more than we had before. So those are big steps to me. And we celebrate just the big and the small things. Number 4, I am worthy of self-care and compassion, even on the toughest days. And that's something I've really, really, really had to work on. I have, in the midst of my daughter being sick, I'm a caregiver for other family members. I've gotten sick, and I've been sick on and off with things she picks up from school and just some other conditions that I'm trying to figure out for myself. And so as I've been sick, recently I took myself to the doctor, and I was just so proud of myself because I'm like, Danielle, you practice self-care. And I'm like, if I can take my daughter to 6 different appointments for specialists, why can't I do the same for myself? And I kind of felt guilty because I'm like, well, I need to be doing this. And I should be, getting this prepped for my daughter. Or, oh, the time that I was at an appointment, I could have been taking her to an appointment. But I'm like, Danielle, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't care for your child. And so it's important to practice self-care when, it's a hard day, and when I'm frustrated, and when my child is just inconsolable, when she's putting everything in her mouth, when she has the memory lapse, when her battery is drained because of her medicine that she's on and I have to carry her, when my ex-husband doesn't fully understand, when he said he's going to come to an appointment but cancels and doesn't come. All these different things, I just realized I still have to practice self-care, whether that's just getting a meal that I like for just $7. Last night I took myself out. It was a night where I didn't have my daughter and I felt guilty. And I said, Danielle, put that guilt away. You deserve a night on your own. And I'm like, last night I slept so well, and I haven't slept well in a while, as I try and check on my daughter, make sure she's okay. And I said, don't feel guilty. You don't have to call every 5 minutes. It's okay to just do something for yourself. And because of that, I feel kind of refreshed and recharged. I'm like, okay, when she comes back from dad's, then I can have more to give her and pour into her versus trying to just pour into her when I'm empty and running on fumes. So the next affirmation is, I am grateful for the unique perspective and experiences my child brings into my life. I've learned that by working with kiddos that have special needs, like to see how they see the world and how they look at things differently and how they process things and how just things like tickles and wiggles and other things and squeezies for them can be just life giving. And I'm like, well, it's just tickling. It's not a big deal or just bubbles. But for them, they love it. And it just like lights up their face and changes their life. And I'm just like, oh, maybe it is just the small things. So things like that. The next one is I'm not alone in this journey. There's a community support and understanding around me. Realize that you're not alone. And I realized that when you have a child that has special needs, you can feel very isolated because you're just like, oh, I don't want people to I don't want my child to act out in public. People won't understand, that maybe they have a lot of equipment. Maybe they do things that are not appropriate. And you're just like, I don't want to have to deal with that. Maybe they elope, which I know is scary, as that happened recently. Someplace I was at an event and I was actually leaving the event and a child ran and I was the closest to the mom and the child, and just kind of that mode kicked in. I was going to my car, I wasn't thinking about it. And then I saw the child run, I saw the mom run, and I ran and we caught her. Thankfully, mom caught her right before she got to the street. Mom had one hand, I took the other hand, didn't know these people, but I talked to the little girl and she was upset because she didn't win a prize. And for her whole world was ending. But in that, I was able to come alongside the mom and talk to the little girl and say, you know what, sometimes when I don't get what I want, I get upset too. And I understand being upset. And I said, but it's okay because maybe we can get another item. And just talking to her through it and trying to comfort the mom and realizing that this is the mom's every day. This is what she's used to. This is her normal. And so in that, just realizing that there are people that can support you, whether it's a virtual support group, in-person support group, other moms that have children that are struggling due to the same conditions. I know support groups have been just life-giving for me. Many support groups in my area, unfortunately, have closed. But in that, I found a lot of virtual help and organizations and foundations that have articles and resources and other things. I'm like, okay, someone gets it. I don't feel so alone. And I'm like asking parents and I'm like, okay, does your child have this before they have a seizure? And does your child do this? And does your child's school do this? And, has your child's doctor said this? Would you get a second opinion? That's been so helpful because I don't have it from my ex. And a lot of times with family, they don't really quite understand it. They don't get it, or they're not really willing to take the time to really learn about my daughter's condition. And different things. And a lot of times too, it's something we kind of keep private. We don't really go around family that much, don't have a huge friend network. And it's not something we just post everywhere. We're just, kind of keeping it, kind of close to home until we just get more things figured out. And for my daughter's safety and so much more. Her privacy too. And then just kind of wrapping things up. The next one says, I'm resilient and capable of overcoming any obstacle that comes our way. And I love that. Just being reminded, if you don't remember any of the rest of that, just remember that you are capable. And in the midst of everything that tells you that you're not capable, you say, oh, I forgot to give my child her medicine. Like last week, my daughter fell asleep before I could give her medicine. And I'm like, oh no, something bad's going to happen. Thankfully, nothing happened. She was tired. And I'm trying to get her in bed so she won't be overly tired and so much more, because I know that causes more trouble and it makes it hard for the next day and everything else. And so in that, knowing that I'm capable, okay, yes, I forgot her medicine at one time. I felt bad, but in that, knowing that I'm capable to give it to her the next time and the next day and the day after that and after that, and to just find the resources and the help that she needs. I'm capable of doing that. I'm capable of talking to the doctor, even though they do doctor speak. And I'm like, well, can you just draw pictures so I can understand what's going on? And that happens, just little things. I'm capable, and you're capable too. Next one says, I'm learning and growing alongside my child and becoming a better person in the process. As I learn things on the job and I bring it back home for my daughter, I learn things in school, and so much as I'm in school and she's in school and we do our homework together, just learning just different things, learning her strengths, learning her limits, learning her weaknesses, learning what works and what doesn't work. And, telling that to, her dad and to others, and just saying, okay, I'm learning and I'm growing in things that I didn't know before about her condition. And as my daughter's just getting older, and just things that she likes and doesn't like, and just the things of her just being a 6-year-old, we're just learning together. Then also, I am doing important and meaningful work by advocating for my child's needs and rights. So remember that sometimes people make you feel like you're a burden or like you're asking too much, you're doing too much. But in this, I'm like, for me, there's no over advocating for my child because I know that we have a long road ahead of us. So when it comes to school and me speaking up and meeting with her teachers, I'm like, okay, even though she's being pulled out at least 4 days or 4 times during the week in school for reading help and for counseling and for other resources, that's great, but I still see my child struggling. So if that means contacting the district to get this, or if it is saying, okay, no, we actually do need an IEP because, I went to a meeting recently with people from school and they said, your daughter's fine. We're not going to do an IEP at this time. We're just going to maybe tweak this and do this. But I'm like, okay, things are still kind of going downhill. It's okay for me to still advocate, and it's still okay for you to advocate too. And then also the last one, I am deserving of appreciation and recognition for everything that I do for my family. And be reminded of that because likely, when you're going through divorce, you didn't get that recognition. You got told all the things you weren't doing right. People said, oh, you shouldn't have gotten a divorce. This is why life is hard for you. I've been told that. Oh, if you just stayed, things would be easier for you. And I'm just like, no, I can't put a price on my peace. And I can't put a price on knowing that my daughter is good. She's safe. She's with dad now, so make sure she's in a safe environment. But at the same time, I do know that I just doing, once again, what's best for her and making the decisions that are best for her. As I say, to whether it's advocating, whether it's taking back more time and having custody of her more, or just doing things so she can have consistency. I feel like I'm doing the right thing and I should be recognized for that. And you should be recognized too, especially as parents. A lot of times we don't get recognized enough. It's a thankless job many days, but more importantly too, when you have a child that has special needs, sometimes they can't say thank you. Sometimes they can't say, I love you. Sometimes you might not get that hug. You get kicks and punches and scratches and bites and other things. And yet it's like, deep down your child loves you. You know that you're doing the best that you can and that you're giving your all, the sleepless nights and the appointments and the running around and the medicine and the advocating and speaking up and so much more. So may I just affirm you in this. So may you know that you're capable, that you are enough, and that you are stronger than you know. So thank you so much for joining me for this presentation. This presentation all about co-parenting when your child has special needs. May you be reminded that sometimes your ex-family might not ever get it, but that in this, that you might have to take a few extra steps, but everything that you do, may you do it in the best interest of your child and for your family unit, that you are establishing that you're capable, that you're more than enough, and that you can do this. Sometimes you just need to be told that you can do this. You're like, you got this. And a lot of times for me as a parent, people don't say it enough, but sometimes I'll go to the doctor and they're like, you're doing a great job. And I'm like, thank you, because I'm overwhelmed. I'm tired. It feels like I'm not making any progress. It feels like my daughter is stuck. It feels like no matter how much I try, make 2 steps forward, get pushed 4 steps back, but just being reminded that you're doing enough, that you are enough, and that you're capable. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that things work out regarding the co-parenting situation. I hope things work out regarding your child as you try and get them resources, navigate the health system, and do what's in their best interest, and so much more, and help them to just thrive and have a life in the midst of their condition. So thank you so much for listening. I'm Danielle Ross. I am the owner of Fresh Start Life Coaching LLC, which I didn't mention at the beginning. And if you do ever want to reach out or connect, my email is fslcpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, it's F as in Frank, S as in Sam, L as in Larry, C as in Cat, podcast@gmail.com, fslcpodcast@gmail.com. And I am Danielle. I'm the owner of Fresh Start Life Coaching LLC. And thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you so much for listening. And I wish you the best overall as you do what's best for your family. Have a good day. Bye.